Hi everyone, Alex here from HowToo, and I'm super excited to welcome you to today's webinar, Customer Education as a Growth Engine. I'm Alex and I'll be your facilitator and host for today's webinar, and we're joined with some great experts on the area of customer education. Today we'll be covering a couple of things, including a showcase of EventsAir's award-winning Academy and Rising Star program. We'll look at proven strategies to use education as a revenue driver, how to reduce support costs through scalable learning, the difference between customer and partner education and why that matters, lessons from HubSpot about content quality, accessibility, and scale, and practical tips to start building a scalable, accessible education engine fast. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am at the moment, the Turrbal people in Brisbane. I would also extend to everybody else on the webinar an invitation to acknowledge the land on which you are currently residing as well. If you don't know where you are, then definitely go and look it up. And I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd like to start off with, on our agenda today, we're actually going to cover a couple of different things. We're going to start with an EventsAir showcase of the Academy from Renee Elliott, and I'll introduce her in a moment. We'll then have a panel discussion, and we will leave some time for some Q&A towards the end of the webinar, although we will be answering questions throughout the entire webinar. I'd like to invite everybody to participate along the way by entering your questions into the Q&A area of the webinar panel. And we'll answer those questions as we go rather than waiting necessarily towards the end of the webinar to answer those. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Renee Elliott to take us through the Academy at EventsAir, why they implemented it, and take us through a little bit of a walkthrough of the platform itself. To introduce Renee, Renee Elliott is a passionate advocate for customer experience and innovation in the events industry. With over 2 decades at EventsAir, she currently leads the company's global customer strategy, overseeing success, support, and education. Renee has been instrumental in shaping the EventsAir platform since 2014 and recently stepped into the role of interim head of product. Her blend of product knowledge and customer insight offers a thoughtful perspective on the evolving landscape of event technology. Thank you so much for joining us today, Renee, and over to you.
When we bring on new customers or new customers or new users within an organization, it's really valuable to harness those features quickly. And so when we embarked on this, we also needed to consider what our student learners needed. We actually partner with TAFEs, universities and colleges who offer event and hospitality courses. As part of their courses, their students are able to get real world industry experience using a platform like EventsAir. It's a partnership that we're really, really proud of, but it does actually bring its own challenges. Though the learning outcomes of a student is very different to the learning outcomes of a user who's using EventsAir for commercial reasons. So we had an LMS that assisted us for quite a number of years, and it played a really important role. But what we found, it was no longer serving our customers in the way they wanted to learn. So we set out to really redesign and redevelop our academy or our educational platform. And we launched the Academy almost 2 weeks ago, powered by HowToo. And as you can imagine, it was a project that was in planning for many, many months. And what we took and what drove us to where we got to was really listening and learning to our users about what their learning experience was and the pain points that they have, and how did that drive us to the solution that we have today. So we'll jump into that now and take you through what our academy looks like. So you should be able to see that screen now. I'll just click the share button because that definitely helps.
We can see it now. Thanks, Renee.
Excellent, excellent. So you can see here, I'm actually in the EventsAir Academy already. We took it to its limits and really made sure that we made it feel like our product as well. Customers are able to get to the EventsAir Academy from EventsAir, and I'll talk a little bit about that and why we made that decision. But we wanted to really make sure it was easy to find and get their hands on quickly to start that kind of learning process. We chose to put together our academy in different streams based on somebody's experience. So you'll see here, I have kind of an introduction, how to use the academy and understand what I'm going to embark on. And then it's ready for takeoff, the basics. So what this I might go to here when I'm just first starting out, and then intermediate and advanced. So we made a decision to do that really specifically so that we could address our large platform and break it down into sizable pieces of knowledge that I can take on at the appropriate time in my learning journey. If I jump into the ready for takeoffs, we took the time to really set out exactly what should be focused on for the basics course. And that was a large breadth of detail areas within our platform, but not too deep in its functionality to really kind of give our learners the ability to explore the platform and get a really good understanding of how to do things quickly. As I said, with a large breadth. So we have 14 lessons here. You'll see we've broken these down and really understood kind of how somebody wants to use our platform. We really took it upon ourselves to really understand what do they need to do first? How do we get them to there? So you'll see here there's the 14 lessons. The last lesson is an exam, and I can talk to that in just a moment. We put a lot of thought into not only the lessons themselves, and the content within each one, but the lesson structure and how we wanted our learners to actually progress through the content. So we started with, I'll just quickly jump into lesson 1 here, is a context setting question, how will EventsAir make my life easier? So really kind of, why am I here? What is this particular lesson all about? We also started with a video, context setting video. These are really short, sharp videos. It's really about, what is this lesson about? Why am I here? What am I going to learn? We follow that up with this written in text. So what are the learning outcomes? What do I expect to learn? This is a really great way for our learners, and we got feedback from our previous academy was, I can quickly find out whether this is for me or not, and if not, I can jump out and go to something else. All of our lessons have a very similar structure in this way. A first kind of opening, context setting, what is this lesson about? The overview and the objectives, and then these kind of panels at the bottom. We always start with a full lesson video. This lesson video is normally longer. It's an instructional video that shows our platform, that talks about the benefits of features, the buttons to tick, the fields to populate, those sorts of things. The reason that we did this is we found that our learners, we have very different types of learners, as I mentioned, and this allows them to either watch and just listen, watch and take notes, watch and follow along, however they choose to learn. Additionally, we followed that up with secondary kind of steps within the lesson that allows them to read and follow along maybe at a little slower pace and do exercises along the way. So with the help of, HowToo, we've been able to put this in step-by-step process orientated sections within the lesson that goes through, again, kind of information written along with screenshots of our platform and interactive exercises along the way to help our users stay engaged. One other really strong piece of feedback that came through from our learners, which we took on very heavily, was the interactive engagement that we had in our previous lesson academy was really minimal, and it became quite monotonous and dull. So we put a lot of effort into understanding how could we make it engaging, how could we keep the learner going down the learning path. So you'll see here there's lots of things that we can do. We also could have broke apart that full lesson video in smaller, digestible snippets that really dug into a particular area within our platform. And I can talk a little bit more about this throughout the webinar, but this is really about being able to kind of put your finger on exactly that piece of information within the lesson itself. You can see there's lots of interactive style exercises here, and then a really great ending to the lesson to say you've completed and you can continue on. We have, I'll just jump out of there. And then we're back to the beginning. So it's really easy to navigate. And again, that was another, very highly feedback that we got. The other areas that I mentioned is we have these intermediate and advanced learning pathways. We're also looking at other learning pathways that kind of dig more into skills that make up, areas of user types and personas within our kind of customer base, just so that we can kind of give further learning pathways to particular types of personas or types of professions within the events industry that we see within our customers. I think that was all I wanted to take you through. Happy to take questions, obviously, but I know that we've got lots of other content to cover. So over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Renee. I appreciate you taking us all through that, and fantastic job on the academy. Great to showcase that today. I'd like to invite into the discussion with us Chris and Lisa, please, for our panel. I'll introduce Chris first. So Chris brings 13 years of experience designing and developing and scaling customer education academies for B2B SaaS orgs. He's from SaaS Academy Advisors. He spent the first 8 years as a founding member of HubSpot Academy, growing and scaling the program to over 1 million learners and 500,000 certifications in 6 languages. Over the past 5 years, he's built SaaS Academy Advisors along with his business partner, Lindsay Thibault, and partnered with over 20 B2B SaaS organizations to design, launch, and scale their academy customer education programs. So we're very lucky to have Chris here today. Thank you. Also joining us is Lisa Vincent, the CEO and founder of HowToo. Lisa is an entrepreneur specializing in learning and technology. In 2020, Lisa launched HowToo, a digital learning AI-powered SaaS platform that fuels business growth with accessible world-class training. HowToo serves more than 200 customers and partners with over 20,000 learners across the globe. Lisa has raised more than $5 million and has been awarded 2023 New South Wales Telstra Best of Business Award for Accelerating Women, and has won the coveted Brandon Hall Gold Award for Best Advance in Content Authoring. So we're very lucky to have everybody here today. I'd like to lead with a question for the panel, and please, again, anybody that's on the call, I'd love for you to use the Q&A section to ask some questions, and we can field some of those questions as we go. But the first question I'd like to open with is for everyone, and I'd love for Chris for you to lead on the response first, is 3 to 5 question categories that people could ask themselves before building an academy. And I think we're going to even maybe turn this into a one-sheeter after the webinar if we can.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks again for having us all, Alex. And definitely a one-sheeter after this because it's hard to pick just a few. But I would say the 3 categories that I always like to think about and find important for businesses to be thinking about as they're kind of in this ideation phase. The first is your current state. And what I mean by that is, what do you have and what are you working with when it comes to existing content? Everything from your brand, your point of view, how you differentiate. Do you have an approach or a methodology? Do you have some subject matter expertise currently internally? Is that external? Where do you line up with the industry? Truly understanding where you are from a existing content within your organization is a key piece. The second one I would say is the who and how are you going to deploy the educational content to, and what is the intended impact of that content. So the easiest way to sum that up is 4 audiences. You have industry education, right? Certifications for anybody in the industry looking to learn, customer education, specifically to your users, partner education, which I know we'll touch on a little bit more, and then our employee education. and who are we deploying that to, and what is the ROI, the business impact? And the third one is your investment strategy. How are you going to invest in your academy program? Are you going to take a 10% of somebody's time to build one course, get it out there to one small audience and see what happens? Or are you going to look at it and say, we're going to hire a headcount, we're going to get an LMS from the beginning, and we're going to build a program that's going to exist and scale alongside the business? The only way you can answer that is to understand number two, which is what is the ROI of how you're going to deploy this? And what is the cost to deploy that based off of your existing center of excellence or your collective knowledge of your organization? So those are the three I'd start with. Could definitely go further, but a lot of times we see companies, SaaS businesses, launch an academy without really considering those three things and making sure that they line up.
Thanks so much, Chris. Lisa, Renee, did you have anything to add to that?
Maybe from my perspective, once you know those things, and I think they're super important, Chris, and for us, we went about it with a very particular kind of end user in mind, end user and student, as I mentioned. But when you have that, then kind of what else are you trying to resolve and solve? So kind of within those areas, what are the business challenges that you're wanting to kind of solve in that process? Is it retention? Is it growth? Is it product adoption, driving those sorts of reducing support load? So there's lots of things that we thought about as well, even just in one of those things that you talked about in the four.
Thanks, Renee. I'm not sure if Lisa, are you still with us? Have you got anything to add to that as well? Okay. We did have a question come through for you, Renee, after your presentation of the Academy, and I'd love to answer that before we get too further down some of the panel questions. So Kate had said that your Academy looks awesome, that she knows that you only launched 2 weeks ago, but have you had any results or feedback yet from clients about how they're finding it?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. We have had some feedback already, which is wonderful. We've had so different types of feedback. One we had directly through one of our account managers internally, stating that they had started the Ready for Takeoff Basics lesson, and even though that they were a user of the platform already, that they'd already picked up a few little tips and tricks along the way that they didn't know before, which was really great to see. That not only our beginner, even though we're thinking about the basics as a basic course for new users, it was kind of helping our existing customers who'd use our platform already. And then also we've had some really long-term users who've done the Academy the exam for the Ready for Takeoff, and posted that on LinkedIn already as well, saying that they really enjoyed the new experience through the HowToo Academy. So yeah, really great feedback, and we're hoping to receive much more, obviously, as we build out further course and pathways.
Thanks so much, Renee. I've just received a message from Lisa. There's a fire alarm going on in the building that she's at, so she'll be back with us shortly. Just to follow up with your answer, Renee, congrats on the build. I'm curious to hear how do you see the Academy fitting into your overall tech stack of customer support, and how will it in turn be able to drive down costs for your department specifically?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I mentioned when I first started the screen share was really that we made a very conscious decision to actually make the Academy available from our platform. So when somebody logs into the platform, they can click on Learn straight away. So there's no trying to fumble my way around trying to find the learning experience. So that's kind of the way in which it fits into the tech stack, kind of at a rudimentary level, I guess. We also wanted to ensure that the content and the efforts that we're putting into creating the content could be used in multiple ways. So talked about the video and how we use the full lesson video for smaller snippets of content, 30 seconds, how do I do something? And we're reusing those particular snippets in our knowledge base articles. We have a fully fleshed out knowledge base that covers all of the areas of our platform that actually serves our support system as well. So we have a live chat AI bot that we've seen very, very good results with in handling a lot of those how-to questions. How do I do something? What does this feature do? And we really see the efforts that we've put into the video content really complementing all of that knowledge base articles and content there as well. So we really see it as tightly integrating it into the support processes like I talked about, and really kind of becoming that enablement tool for our users to self-upskill and solve their problems independently before actually trying to reach out to support. I think just as importantly, we see the Academy as a critical tool to our onboarding process. And I talked about that a little bit already with our new users and new customers coming on board, but we'll be looking at how can we leverage that tool to assist our customer success managers in terms of the onboarding process and the product adoption, saving both us and our customers time to get to that stage where I talked about. It's like really seeing the value, really being able to harness those tools so that they can get on with what they need to do within the platform.
Thanks so much, Renee. Some really great points in your response, in particular around the repurposing of content, the role for knowledge base and other formats of tech support, and how the training kind of fits in nicely with that piece, and also transforming the way in which customer success handle the customer as a result. So thank you for those insights. Chris, over to you. What are your top 5 strategies for using or positioning education as a growth engine?
Yeah, it's a good question. It really ties into what Renee had said as a follow-up to the 3 questions or areas to consider, which is it all comes back to the business objectives that your company has. And because educational content can be assessed and we can see the behavioral changes of somebody who's consuming that content, we can see the impact on the business and the impact on the user. So when it comes to your strategies, your growth strategies, it really kind of rolls right back up to your business metrics, right? You're going to be looking at things like customer lifetime value. You might be looking at different areas. You might be looking at ARR or MRR number if you're a SaaS business. You might be looking at retention. You might be looking at NPS, number of advocates. So when it comes to the strategies, there's many, and I'll share a few of my favorite, but really it comes to what is my current business's strategy? What are my departmental or my department goals? And then from there, what go-to-market do we have? Right? Are we a PLG motion? Are we a product-led growth motion? Or are we still selling with AEs or sales reps directly? Once you have that figured out and you know what you're going for, then you can start deploying these different strategies. And one strategy I'll share that I love that gets overlooked so much is you go through your onboarding process, you invest usually some human capital into developing a good onboarding flow to help somebody get implemented and see time to value. Most people in SaaS are around 18 months to 24 months. So that admin or that user leaves, a new user comes on. And there's the investment to ramp that new user up like they're a new customer is usually much less. And sometimes those new users are almost forgotten and they're on their own. And so deploying this educational content for a new user onboarding flow is a great way to repurpose the existing content that you might have already created for your onboarding to reduce the time to value, to speed up the time to completion of onboarding. That same content can be repurposed or repackaged, and that new user onboarding, many times we see a lift both in the overall retention of accounts who get new admins across all SaaS software industries, and then also a reduction in that ramp time. So a reduction in the time that a new user who takes over an account is submitting support tickets, is requesting time from their CSM. So that's one of the strategies I love. To keep it short, the other one is what we did at HubSpot, right? That was creating educational content for industry professionals. And that was a big one. And we had a point of view. HubSpot had a point of view, right? The idea of inbound marketing. It was not about interrupting, it was about adding value. That whole kind of phase of digital marketing. And that allowed us to reposition and teach marketing through a different lens. It was still marketing. We were still doing the same things. It was still blogging. It was still content marketing. You were still doing your website, but it packaged it differently. And if for any of the customer or people who are here today, if you have a strong point of view on the market or how to approach a job or an industry and a software that aligns with that, your ability to create what might seem as existing content that there's already 10 courses, but your ability to reposition that and teach people in a different way can be really impactful for both awareness, but lead generation as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. We're hearing a bit of a theme and a pattern coming up here around it's really important to have some clear objectives and to hone in on exactly what you're trying to achieve with your academies and your customer education. And then we're hearing about how to then deploy those strategies and execute against them. And it's often about that content creation and how that content's used to then enable and or to solve the problem that it's trying to solve there as well. That dovetails nicely into my next question. And I will encourage again, anybody that's in the webinar, if you'd like to ask a question of the panel, please do. And I'm happy to inject a question as we go. But I'd like to hand over to Lisa. Lisa, good to have you back. Hope everything's okay with the fire alarms going off.
It's all right. There's no fire, but it was just, yeah, we're all good now.
Great.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you, how important is the quality of the content? So we've talked about the objectives and we've talked about the ROI and how we're going to deploy and a little bit about the execution. But in terms of the content itself and what learning pedagogies we can utilize in customer education and partner education, can you give us a little bit of information about that, please?
Yeah, so I think the quality is absolutely key. If the quality engagement is not there, then the whole strategy is really going to backfire. So we need to really look at how to design an experience that will achieve the outcomes, be aligned to the needs of the audience and flexible to adjust to those different needs and contexts. But also, yeah, really engaging because we won't get that behavioral change and that growth. So, we really kind of merge the learning science with a bit of marketing techniques because it's really about persuasion. And so one model we really like is the AGES model, which is, based on and drawn from neuroscience. So we really need to kind of grab the learner's attention. So that can be through, how this is going to be relevant to them, maybe statistics, whatever it is that can kind of grab their attention. We like to generate connection to what they already know. We like to connect to them emotionally. So storytelling, we know that people learn and retain content more if they're emotionally engaged, and to space it. So getting little bits of learning over time. And also I think something that we very much with EventsAir we talked about was understanding the why. So for customer education, it's not just about what you are, the how and the what. And I know that's Chris very much talks about this model. It's very much about the why is this important? Why is this important for my role? And it's beyond just the use of the product. It's really the context of how I do my job. And then the last thing is brand. So, customer education is an extension of your brand. And so building in this sort of tone, the style, all the elements, the interactivity even aligned with your brand is important in terms of building that loyalty. And it's not just about delivering information, it's an engagement process.
Thanks so much, Lisa. We've kind of covered the next topic a little bit across several of the responses that we've heard today, but I'd love to hear, Chris, you kind of galvanize it. Lisa's point around the why, a lot of the points around being clear on your objectives and the strategies behind what you're trying to achieve with the academy or the education is really important. But I'd love for you to help us understand what's the difference between customer education technical support, partner education, and product guides or analytics? And what role does customer education actually play in that ecosystem?
Yeah, okay, it's a good one. So I wouldn't say that there is perfect boxes which each fits into, but when I think of customer education, I think of it as proactive, definitely scalable, and it's strategic in the sense that you're deploying it for a specific outcome that you're tracking, right? But it's that proactive piece. So somebody who's going to learn how to do something or learn how to do their job better, learn how to do their job better or more efficiently with a software. But they're proactively learning something. When I think of technical support, that's reactive and tactical. Equally as important part of the puzzle when it comes to your CS. But that technical support is I'm actively trying to do something in the software and I'm stuck, right? I need help to do something. And that's kind of where the product guides fit in between your reactive and proactive customer education. The product guides, depending on your business, how you structure them, some might be more technical, whereas others might actually have a little bit more in depth, include some best practice, some recommendations on how to follow a specific process or execute on the process. So the guides and really kind of fit in between. And then the partner education, I think, is almost like a sibling to customer education. Right, there's overlaps in the DNA, right? Most of the time, partners are going to go through the customer education. But in addition to that, when we're thinking about partner education, we're doing that because our goal is to enable our partners, whether they're resellers, implementation specialists, integration partners, whatever they may be. Our goal is to essentially enable them and then ensure that they adhere to our brand standards, that they're an extension of our business, right? We don't want our partners who are delivering things in a way that's going to negatively impact our brand. So when I think of that partner education, it's almost a sibling or stacked on top of customer education. Lots of times we use the visual of like industry education as the baseline. Anybody in the industry could consume this content. Customer education is how to do your job well using this software that was built with a specific intention in mind on how to do your job. Partner is you need both of those, but then also you need to know how to align with our brand standards and be an extension of our business. And then, of course, the top is the education for our employees because they need to know it all. So that's how I think of the differences between those areas, but it very much depends on how the business is defining each of these things. And I always recommend to take that note of it's important to define the role and responsibility or the job to be done of each of those different things, whether it's customer education, technical support, help documentation, product guides. And Renee, I know you mentioned that you have a robust built out help documentation, right? In addition to customer education. So that's a really good point. And I'm sure you have an idea or your team does on how you're defining those different roles and when customers should choose those different resources.
Yeah,
Thanks so much,
definitely.
Chris. I love that response. Sorry, Renee, did you have a
No,
follow-up
no,
to
I
that?
was just agreeing that yes, we find that they do have different roles, but they complement each other.
Absolutely. And thanks, Chris, for describing that for us. I think that's one thing that I find when I'm talking to people who are doing the customer education piece that is a little bit of a puzzle for them is can the knowledge base be all encompassing, cover all of these scenarios and do everything that we're wanting it to do? And inevitably the answer is no. And I love how you described that the education is really helping the user of the system or the software to actually understand how to get value from it. And really that's where that piece of retention and expansion of accounts and so on and so forth, if we're looking at as customer education as a growth engine, that's a perfect kind of marriage between when customer education helps the customer get the value and stick around in the product and realize the value of the product and see that expand. I know that you talked a little bit about the HubSpot Academy and that piece. Could you quickly just talk a little bit about what you saw with when people were actually had gone through that process of the education in the academy prior to coming on board as an actual user of the platform and how that was realized in that real example?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things along the way was probably we started HubSpot Academy in its third version. So much to Renee having just launched another version of the Academy. HubSpot Academy had many versions that we learned along the way, but the one that has evolved to today, we launched around 2012. By 2016, I think it was when we were realizing that folks who were consuming the inbound marketing certification or the content marketing certification or other certifications that weren't customers, those who were in our lead funnel who were actively engaged, not only closed in less time, but usually had less discounting on average, less discounting of the software. And then in addition to that, what we found was if one or more people who were in the system within the first week had a certification, their time to onboarding and their retention at 12 months was multiple points higher. So for a period of time at HubSpot, we went as far as to offer a 20% discount to companies who were buying HubSpot, who had one or more folks at their organization certified before they purchased. And so that was a really strong signal in 2016, of how this educational content was helping so much. And really we couldn't nail it down to one thing, but one of the main assumptions we were going with was you have a team and multiple people in these teams have come from different companies and they're thinking and using things like conversion process, lead flow. So just one thing that you do in digital marketing can be explained or defined or used different descriptors. And now you have a whole team working together to try to do these things. It adds for confusion, complexity, and just by the whole team aligning behind a common set of language and way to think about things, we would get feedback regularly. This was the most valuable thing of the Academy. Like, yes, all of the information was helpful, but it was the alignment that it was creating. So that was a fun one, but for sure, we definitely relied heavily on using the education pre-sale. And the same thing also for employees when folks were applying to HubSpot for many years on the resumes for CS and other teams, it said, HubSpot certification, not required, but ideal, or recommended. And what that meant was the onboarding process to bring somebody on. They knew what inbound marketing was. They had a test to show us that. They had used HubSpot. They had passed the HubSpot certification. Those folks coming on already were well along their onboarding process as an employee and ready to provide value to the folks that they'd be working with, whether that's in support, onboarding, customer success, sales, or whatever it may be.
I love that example. Thanks so much for sharing, Chris. And I don't know why an analogy that comes to my mind is when you have two people come together to dance salsa and someone doesn't know how to dance salsa, it's an awkward dance. And I feel like, that alignment that you're talking about between the team or the alignment between the customer and the platform, when they're talking a similar set of language and they've got a similar set of steps, it's not that awkward dance anymore. It's actually, let's lock into step and do this together. I think your response actually dovetails beautifully. And I'd like to, into a question that we've been asked by the audience. And I'd like to pose this one to both Lisa and Renee. Chris has said, I understand that EventsAir provides a certification for customers which gives a tangible outcome to their learning journey. Is that recommended by HowToo with other customers? And is there evidence that this approach equates to better results, in particular, improved product usage or stickiness?
Okay.
Maybe throw to Lisa
Renee?
first.
Oh, okay. I thought I was going to get Renee. You go first, Renee, because specific to EventsAir, and then I'll add more broadly.
Yeah, sure. I think the evidence that we see when people are going through the entire process in order to get to the certification piece of the experience is we made a very big change recently with this new academy from our old one, is that we were very forceful, I guess, with the learning experience, and you had to do all of these things before you could even get to the certification. And whilst that was made with obviously the intention of making sure that you kind of went through the process and you did the prerequisites in order to understand the platform enough to do the certification, it put all these boundaries around the kind of the learning pathway. So we've removed all of that now with our new academy. And so if you would like to get into the exam, then jump straight in and have a go. What we find with that is that it really provides just certification in itself, regardless of, I guess, how they get there. It's probably more about kind of advocacy and definitely kind of product adoption and stickiness. If we kind of if we can test that they know the platform in particular ways, that we know that they understand the platform, are able to adopt those particular features, and obviously they're going to be able to utilize that within their business operations to get the most out of our platform. So therefore kind of driving product value and adoption, but also, and I guess that goes hand in hand with stickiness. But what also we are really angling for in terms of the certification is that advocacy, building a community and having our users really share on their social media platforms that they have this skill, they have this certification. Kind of goes back to what Chris was saying, is really making sure that it's not just about kind of learning the platform for the job that they're doing now. That's very important, but it's also about their professional development as well, and how can they share those skills in ways for their community, but also potential employees in the future, all of those sorts of things as well.
Thanks so much, Renee.
And so I would
Lisa?
just add, I would just add to that certainly the research indicates that having certification improves, advocacy, engagement, retention. I think it also just taps into that kind of natural human motivator that we have to achieve and to share that achievement. It was very, very popular many years ago, and maybe not quite as the motivator that maybe it was, in terms of sharing on LinkedIn, certificates and all that sort of thing. But I still think it does, having that outcome and that drive to achieve that certification. Certainly the research indicates that still drives, more engagement, more adoption, more stickiness. So, yeah.
And as Chris was explaining earlier, potentially less churn at the end of 12 months, or less of a need for a discount to see value or something like that as they come in to purchase the product as well. And I think what Renee, EventsAir are doing really well with the Rising Star program, and what you did really well, Chris, at HubSpot, is that industry education prior to somebody coming onto the actual onto the actual platform and engaging with the academy. And what that meant is that when people are actually applying for jobs, they're actually putting on their resumes that they have the skill of being able to use the platform. And what better way to really establish yourself as a market shareholder and thought leader in the space when you're getting, as hiring managers, constantly resumes coming across your desk saying this person's got that skill in this particular software. It really reinforces that in people's minds that this platform is the platform of choice in the industry. There's a great question. I'd like to park it for a moment, and it dovetails just after what I'm going to ask the whole panel here. That's why I surface it now, which is, where do you all believe customer education is heading into the future? And what impact do you think artificial intelligence is going to have in this space? I'll let anybody come forward first with their thoughts. I'm happy to repeat the question for anyone if you need it at some point.
I'll jump in first. We're seeing a huge growth in the opportunity, I think, of AI for learning. Really our opportunities to make learning much more adaptive and contextual. So, pulling together learning that is even predictive of what you need and when you need it. We're seeing it in, accelerated content creation. We're seeing it in, more context personalization. We're seeing it in the kind of power of the data in terms of, demonstrating return on investment. So we're seeing, what's the correlation between engagement with learning and product adoption. So that sort of holy grail of learning, which is always, I've sort of alluded, most people who work in learning is that can't demonstrate they're actually getting an outcome from our investment. So that opportunity to actually show that this investment is actually achieving results, not just from a learning perspective, but also from a business perspective. So I still think there'll be humans involved, but certainly AI is providing enormous opportunities for customer education and education more generally. So that's what we're seeing, and that's what we're focusing on.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Chris, Renee, anything to add?
You good, Chris?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely the content acceleration is a big one. But just because you can accelerate the speed in which you create your content doesn't mean you're going to get those outcomes that you're looking for, right? From the question of, is there evidence this approach equals better results? Yes, if you understand what are customers who are successful doing and how are they doing it, and what do they know to be able to do it. And once you can answer those questions and put that into an educational track, training, something that has a certification that says, yes, you know how to do it, that's where you start seeing the results. So garbage in, garbage out. You can create a lot quickly, but that doesn't mean it's going to have any meaningful impact on your business. You need to have, like Renee has shared, a clear purpose as to why the educational content's being deployed for the business. AI can't fix that yet. Certainly over the next 3 to 5 years, once businesses start getting their data in order, and you can start more easily gleaning insights of cohorts of customers who have retained or bought more, have seen success and seen value. What are they doing? What do they know? That's when I think we're going to be able to start improving the effectiveness of our education far beyond the 5 or 10 points, across the SaaS industry. A lot of businesses report in terms of retention uptick or other metrics. But I think that's actually going to take more time than maybe we initially hoped or that we think. And so when I think of what's actually driving impact with AI today, it's using AI for content acceleration, but also using it for localization, translation, and accessibility. Right? It used to be expensive to localize something. It used to be expensive to create a transcript. It used to be expensive to format that content in different ways that are going to help different people read or consume the content. It's not anymore. It's dollars, if that. Right. And so I think there's things in the short term we're going to get a lot of value from with AI. I do think long term with agents, with how things are going to work, we're still going to need to teach people how to build the agents. We're still going to need to teach people how to think about the product, to prompt the software correctly to get the outcome. That education is still going to need to be there. And if you asked me this 9 months ago, I'd say everyone's just going to turn to ChatGPT and ask it, and it'll tell them the answers. OpenAI, creators of ChatGPT, just came out with their academy, and they are running courses and they are delivering content to teach people how to use ChatGPT. So we have a long way to go before we're going to be able to snap our finger, ask a question, and get everything we need. And in that between now and then, which I think is years and years, there's a lot more points that we can get from retention or reduction in ticket volume and things like that, in which using customer education as one of those tools is going to be important and valid.
Thanks so much, Chris. Renee, anything to add? There's been quite a few points raised already.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot has been covered there. I think the only other thing is really, really seeing where AI goes in terms of how user interacts with your product, and therefore, understanding the user journeys that somebody takes within the platform and serving that content to them, as they go through it preemptively. Really, it's kind of like it understanding kind of how you're using the platform, what you're needing to do, what your role and your persona is, and therefore it knows what you're looking for before you're looking for it. I think that's kind of where I think we'll get to. But I think I agree with Chris that we've got a long way to go before we get that there in understanding those those metrics and that data.
I think I'd just
Thanks,
add
Renee.
one more thing too, just the maintainability of the content. I think AI is certainly going to have, create a lot of opportunity for us to more easily maintain content, because that is one of the things we need to keep considering as you're building out an academy, how you're going to maintain it and evolve it and continue to keep it up to date. So I think that's a shorter term opportunity as well.
Absolutely. I would add as well, future of reporting and data analysis as well. One of the things that's really challenging is that you've got a number of products. We talked about the product stack of everything that you've got in customer education, but add to that as well, CRMs or customer management, account management platforms, product analytics, and so on and so forth. You've got all of this siloed data across multiple different areas. And what we're starting to see in things like deep research from OpenAI, for example, their recent deployment with HubSpot is the ability to actually look at huge amounts of data and be able to track trends and find things that maybe would take you, days or if not weeks to actually drill down and come to a hypothesis of what we're actually seeing there. So the ability to drill down into the data and combine data from multiple sources that includes that customer education piece as well, I think is going to be a game changer in the future, and definitely something AI will play a big part in. A really interesting question that's kind of followed up, from the audience that's come through is, with customer education, how would you influence customers to actually use the academy or platform, for their training and their learning, rather than searching for answers on Google or through OpenAI or those kind of tools that are out there and available? I might throw this question to Chris. It looks like you have a thought already.
I'm happy. I'd say first and foremost, we want our content to be indexable. So if somebody does search, they find it, right? So then that's okay. And if we have it, have it done the right way, it will even show up in, ChatGPT if somebody is asking specifically, how do I do this specific thing in the tool? There'll be an answer and then a link to it. But for our customers, there's a few typical ways that it'll be done. First would be, are there ways to embed it in the product at certain points? And not an entire course, but Renee nailed it when she was talking about the modular content. Just because we have an entire course doesn't mean it needs to be consumed in a full 10-course dinner. We might need one course. We might need a snack. We might need a bite. But what is that time in the product, at the place in the product that it's relevant, to possibly have an embedded 1-minute video and then a link? That's one way. Another way a lot of businesses are doing now with their chat agents or chat bots, being able to have an answer and then link to the Academy course. Also cross-linking from your help documentation. That's a big one. Here's how to do X, Y, and Z. Want to learn how to execute on a strategy like our most successful customers? Learn from the pros, or watch this course or whatever it may be. So there's a lot of cross-linking that goes on. There's also a lot to do depending on how your product analytics. If users aren't using a specific product, or they were using it and they stopped using it, or a tool, do you have automations or workflows set up to send emails to say, hey, there's this course, check this out? Or the new users I mentioned earlier, new users added to your account, automatically send a flow to share with them all the resources that are available and push them to it. Customer emails, CSM teams. If you have a larger team, you have CSMs, onboarding specialists, support reps. They are all your biggest advocates. They are your sales rep of your educational product, which is your academy. So those are just a few ways, just kind of rattling off the top of my head, that you can start engaging folks. But it really should be as soon as the sales process. Your sales team having a slide explaining, look, we care and are invested in the success of our customers, and there is an academy for them. So really woven throughout the entire customer journey, they should be getting those touch points along the way.
Thanks so much, Chris. We've got another question from the audience, and I'll encourage everyone, if you've got any questions at this point, we've got only a couple more minutes left. So now's your chance to get your questions in. If you do have to drop off, no problems. There will be a short survey after the webinar, and I'd encourage anybody to answer that. We'll ask some questions like, what topics do you want to hear in the future, and so on. Really helps us build up this webinar series. The question, and I'll pose this one to you, Lisa, first, and maybe Renee, if you've got something to add, or Chris. Earlier, the importance of certification was mentioned. How do we ensure that these certificates mean the content was genuinely understood and mastered, rather than something someone is attaining purely just to tick a box?
Yeah, so I think that gets back to kind of good quality learning design. So if we're clear about what the learning outcomes are, then we're designing learning that where we're testing and assessing that those outcomes can have been achieved. So, good assessment techniques, good questioning that actually assesses application of learning, and getting the challenge at the right level. So ensuring that it's not just a ticking a box and everybody sharing the answers sort of thing, that there's an interest in that engagement. There's cognitive, engagement with the interactions, whether they be through the assessment or not, and the challenge is at the right level to ensure that that assessment is rigorous. So it's putting learners in circumstances where they might need to apply, the principles and the application to certain situations and that. So we are, testing at the right level.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Renee, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Having had an academy in place for a number of years and revamping, what have you learned over the years of actually the certification process? And what have you done differently this time around that maybe you didn't do before?
Yeah, I mentioned before that our previous academy actually forced the learner down a very particular path. They had to do all of these prerequisites to actually get to the certification, and that has its pros and cons. It does help with the situation that you're talking about, where that they've had to go through all of those things in order to get to the point that they can take the exam and complete the certification, so that there is some level of guarantee, I guess, that they kind of have understood and mastered those things before they got to the certification process. But the con to that is that you're very restrictive, and it doesn't lend to a great experience. The way that we're doing now is our learners can jump straight to the certification, and those questions, and what Lisa said, those questions are really specific about what they would have learnt if they went through, let's say, that kind of ready for takeoff basics course, and what we want to reinforce that you should know at that beginner basics level. So we're not focusing too much on that you have to know all of these areas, but what are the real key things that we think are important for you to know at that particular point in time in your learning journey. I think the other thing that we went away from, to be more scalable, to be more efficient in the way that we managed certifications, was actually having a self-serve certification process. We had this very kind of complex thing where they had to submit, work that they'd done in EventsAir that we then could check to really validate that they knew what they were doing. Again, serves a great purpose. We could really see that they understood, but definitely isn't scalable. So it's really, I guess, understanding about what you're trying to for the learner to get out of that particular stage of the learning, and build the certification appropriately.
Thanks so much, Renee. Well, everyone, we've come to the end of our webinar and time here today. I'd like to thank Renee, Chris, and Lisa, our panelists, and Renee for the presentation earlier as well. It's been a fantastic webinar, and thank you to all of the attendees that have stuck around right to the end. I've put my contact details up on here. If you'd like to get a copy of the recording, or if you've got any questions, please do reach out at any stage and reach out to us. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and see you later. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.